There are corners of our world that seem to resist us. Remote islands no one has ever touched. Their coastlines too jagged, their wildlife too lethal. Places where the air sears your lungs and the ground splits beneath your feet, as if the land itself is warning you away. Bunkers buried under decades of silence, sealed so tightly the air inside hasn't shifted in a generation. Even the maps keep their distance. These are the edges of the world where the nearest living soul might be thousands of miles away. No welcome signs, no footprints, just wind, stone, and an uneasy stillness. Some are stamped, restricted in military ink. Others are left alone because getting there is nearly impossible. Bore holes that vanish into the earth with no known end. Government bunkers built to survive global collapse. Valleys where uncontacted tribes live in silence, and islands so dangerous that setting foot on one could mean never leaving. These aren't places people forgot. They're places people were never meant to reach. So wherever you are, tucked in under the covers, curled up with a snack, or just winding down for the night, make yourself comfortable. Let the world outside fade for a while, and join us as we take a quiet journey through the most abandoned, forbidden and forgotten places on Earth. And as always with our videos, the visuals are here to provide context, but they're not required to enjoy the stories. So feel free to close your eyes if you like, just listen, and let's begin. Far out in the South Atlantic Ocean, nearly halfway between the southern tip of Africa and the edge of Antarctica, sits a small island few have ever heard of and even fewer have ever seen. Bouvet Island, just 19 square miles of volcanic rock, glacier and sheer cliff surrounded by some of the roughest waters on Earth. It's so remote, so isolated that it holds the title of the most inaccessible island on the planet. No one lives there. There's no harbor, no airdrop, and no permanent station. And yet, it's a place that continues to stir curiosity. Not because of what's on it, but because of what's not. Bouvet is technically a Norwegian territory claimed in the early 20th century and designated a nature reserve in the 1970s. It has no known history of human habitation, no folklore, and no native people. The island is almost always surrounded by sea ice. The nearest land is over 1,000 nautics away, and the weather is relentless. Wind, freezing rain, sleet, and an ever-present fog that rolls in from the sea like a curtain. Temperatures hover just below. Freezing year-round, it's the kind of place where nature is left to its own devices and where anything unnatural stands out. The island itself is a dome of ice and lava. Formed by volcanic activity, it rises sharply from the ocean with steep cliffs that make any landing by boat nearly impossible. Only a small sliver of exposed coastline, the Naroa or New Rock, offers a spot where helicopters can sometimes land in the rare window of calm weather. Scientists have used it to install automated weather stations or collect samples. But those visits are rare and brief. No one stays long on Bouvet. It doesn't let you. Most of the island is buried beneath a thick glacier that covers over 90% of its surface. There are no trees, no grass, and barely any life beyond hardy mosses, lichens, and the seabirds that nest along the cliffs. Petrels and squash glide over the windswept plateau, while seals and penguins gather in the icy waters below. The silence is near total, broken only by the sound of wind and waves slamming against rock. It's a place that feels untouched, not just by civilization, but by time itself. And yet, for such an isolated and seemingly uneventful island, Bouvet has a handful of stories that remain unexplained. The most well-known mystery dates back to 1964. A British expedition led by a Royal Navy weather ship approached the island on a rare mission. The sea ice had parted just long enough to allow a small team to investigate. They landed at Naroa and began their standard survey. But as they moved across the rocky shore, they came across something unexpected, a lifeboat. It was in good condition, Sturdy, intact, and clearly placed there, not simply washed ashore. Near the boat were a few barrels, some debris, and signs that someone had recently been there, but there were no footprints in the snow, no people, no notes, no explanation. The ship that the lifeboat might have come from was never identified, and no one ever claimed it. In the vastness of the Southern Ocean, the appearance of a lifeboat on an island with no harbour, no settlements, and no clear reason to be visited raises more questions than answers. Was there a shipwreck nearby that went unreported? Had someone attempted to use Bouvet as an emergency stop and vanished? Was it left by a previous expedition and forgotten, or something else entirely? Despite attempts to trace its origin, the boat remains one of Bouvet's enduring riddles. It's not the only one. In 1955, a South African expedition that landed briefly on the island also reported finding strange structures, metal poles, a weathered hut, and discarded debris, but no clear sign of who left them or when. Later visits couldn't confirm what was seen. The reports were vague, the details scattered. But like the lifeboat, they added to the island's reputation for being a place where things show up without a clear cause and then vanish just as quickly. Because of Bouvet's extreme remoteness, conspiracy theories and speculations tend to follow it. Some have suggested it was used during the Cold War as a secret observation point or as a potential emergency shelter. Others point to the lack of surveillance and suggest it's the perfect place to test or hide something. In 2004, it even became the setting for a fictional base in the movie Alien vs. Predator. But none of these theories have been supported by actual evidence. And for the most part, the island has remained exactly what it appears to be, a lonely, icy outpost in the middle of nowhere. Its scientific value, however, is real. Bouvet is part of a unique ecosystem of sub-Antarctic islands, harsh, isolated places that provide scientists with insight into how life survives at the edge of the world. The island's glaciers are monitored for signs of climate change. Its surrounding waters are part of global ocean current systems that help regulate climate and weather patterns far beyond the southern hemisphere. And because the island is so untouched, it serves as a kind of environmental baseline of what the world looks like with no human interference. But even with all that, Bouvet still holds its mystery. There's something about its silence, its inaccessibility, its total indifference to human presence. It doesn't invite stories, it doesn't seem to want visitors, and yet it's there out in the fog, always frozen, always distant. Looking at satellite imagery, Bouvet appears as little more than a smudge in the ocean, a jagged outline surrounded by swirls of white and grey. In winter, even that vanishes beneath clouds and snow. Ships pass hundreds of miles away without knowing it's there. Planes rarely fly overhead. There are no nearby flight paths, no fishing routes, no trade lanes. It's not on the way to anywhere, which makes its rare visitors and the traces they leave all the more striking. One could argue that Bouvet's greatest mystery isn't the lifeboat or the strange equipment or the absence of answers, it's the island itself. Why is it so compelling? Why in a world so mapped, so measured, a frozen rock at the end of the earth can still pull at the imagination? Maybe it's the knowledge that this place exists, a real place so far beyond where most of us will ever go. A reminder that not everything has been touched or explained, that there are still places where silence rules, where the wind carries no stories back. And maybe that's why we're drawn to it, not to conquer it or even to understand it, but simply to know it's there. Out in the South Atlantic, beyond the edges of the map, beyond the reach of roads or rails, there's an island of ice and fog where nothing lives and nothing lingers. A place that resists, endures, and remains. And so Bouvet Island sits as it always has, weathered, watching, and waiting. From the cold, howling winds of Bouvet Island, We now move not into the wild, but behind locked doors, not remote in distance, but in access. In the heart of Pyongyang, tucked away in an anonymous government building, lies an office almost no North Korean has ever seen. And most outsiders are not even supposed to know it exists. It's not a ruin or a lost city. It's something far more modern and in many ways far more unsettling. It's called Room 39, or at least that's what it's called, by those who have tried to investigate it from the outside. The official name may be different. It's never been confirmed by the North Korean government. Its sign, if it has one, is not public, but international experts agree. Room 39 is real, and its influence runs deep through one of the most secretive states in the world. First reported in the late 1970s, Room 39 is believed to be a department within the Workers' Party of Korea, the ruling party of North Korea. Its purpose is to bring in foreign currency, not by taxation or export or tourism, but through methods that range from state-run business ventures to less legal, often murkier sources. This includes gold trading, arms deals, and counterfeit production. According to defectors and intelligence sources, it's also been linked to North Korea's involvement in drug trafficking, cybercrime, and illicit trade networks that operate under layers of front companies and shadow banking systems. But beyond that general understanding, very little is known. There are no public records, no photos from inside, no confirmed list of employees. Just fragments, leaks, rumors, and reports, mostly from defectors or foreign intelligence pieced together like clues from a locked room. The name Room 39 likely comes from the room number it once occupied in the ruling party headquarters. It's thought to now operate out of another building entirely, possibly within the Kim Il-sung Square complex. But the original name stuck, and today it serves as shorthand for something larger. The system of hidden financial operations that help keep North Korea's leadership in power. Some believe Room 39 oversees a network of more than 100 companies and organizations, many based outside of North Korea using false identities or shell companies. These operations are thought to be active in Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and even Africa. The companies themselves might appear innocent: hotels, restaurants, mining firms, or fishing operations. But behind the paperwork, the funds are often funneled back to Pyongyang, supporting the country's elite and financing programs that are otherwise sanctioned or isolated by the international community. At the heart of it all, reportedly, is loyalty to the ruling Kim dynasty. Room 39 is not an independent actor. It's understood to report directly to the country's leadership. Some analysts have even described it as Kim Jong-un's personal slush fund. The money it collects doesn't go into public infrastructure or food programs. It goes toward weapons development, luxury goods, and whatever else the regime deems essential for its survival. The secrecy is by design. The workers inside Room 39 are likely among the most trusted in the country. Not simply bureaucrats, but operatives fluent in finance, trade law, international shipping, and digital networks. They operate behind closed doors, under aliases, and with diplomatic protections when possible. If something goes wrong, if a front company is exposed or seized, they vanish from the record. Occasionally, cracks appear. In 2005, the US Treasury sanctioned a Macau-based bank called Banco Delta Asia, accusing it of laundering funds for North Korean interests. That bank was linked by name to Room 39. In the years that followed, other operations surfaced. North Korean workers found overseas operating restaurants or factories, sending their earnings back to the regime. Ships carrying counterfeit cigarettes, watches, even Viagra traced back to state-owned companies. And more recently, cyber attacks attributed to North Korean hackers have targeted banks, cryptocurrency exchanges, and financial institutions in multiple countries. Each incident points back to the same system: one that operates in the shadows, beyond borders, and with few traces. And at the center of that system is Room 39, but what's most disturbing about it isn't just the money, it's the role it plays in North Korea's structure of power. In a country where the vast majority of citizens struggle with food insecurity and limited access to electricity, Room 39 keeps the inner circle insulated. It maintains the palaces, the imported cars, and the foreign education of elites. It builds the world that the regime lives in entirely separate from the rest of the country. And because it's so hidden, it also resists outside pressure. Sanctions may hit exports and banks, but Room 39's network is flexible, adaptive. It doesn't rely on traditional trade. It deals in gold, rare minerals, encrypted transfers, and untraceable currencies. It's been compared to a state within a state, one that doesn't issue laws but controls the purse strings behind the throne. The eerie part is that for all our modern surveillance, Room 39 still operates. It has outlasted presidents, sanctions, and investigations. It exists in one of the most tightly controlled societies on Earth, where internal dissent is crushed and secrecy is paramount, and it thrives. It's possible that Room 39 has changed over the years, split into multiple departments, rebranded under different names, moved locations, but the function remains to fund the regime through whatever means necessary. What makes it unsettling is that it's invisible in plain sight. You could walk past the building and never know. You could meet someone who works for it and never suspect. Its actions ripple out into black markets, digital vaults, and high-level deals, but it leaves no signature. Defectors who have spoken about Room 39 describe it cautiously. Some say it's more powerful than the official ministries. Others won't talk about it at all. And for many North Koreans, it's not even a known concept. It doesn't appear in textbooks or propaganda. It's not a part of public life. It simply exists humming beneath the surface, always active. In recent years, as cyber capabilities have become more sophisticated, Room 39 or those connected to it are believed to have shifted more of their operations online. The infamous W2Cry ransomware attack in 2017 was linked to North Korean hackers. Cryptocurrency thefts, phishing schemes, and online banking fraud have all been traced back to IP addresses and servers linked to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. These methods are harder to block, harder to track, and increasingly profitable. But even this digital evolution doesn't replace the old methods. Counterfeit goods, illegal trade, and front businesses still play a major role. The network is layered, global, and adaptable, one step ahead of law enforcement in many cases, and protected by diplomatic walls in others. So, what's inside Room 39? We don't know. There are no verified images, no whistleblower photographs, just a name, a reputation, and a growing body of indirect evidence. Its existence is a reminder that not all mysteries are ancient or buried in sand. Some are still unfolding behind reinforced doors in cities we'll never see. And that's what makes Room 39 so compelling. It's not a ruin, it's not a myth. It's something real, current, and active, just hidden from view. A machine that funds a state invisible but present, quiet but immense. In a world where most secrets eventually surface, Room 39 holds on. It doesn't speak, it doesn't flash, it moves quietly in the dark. And for now, that's where it stays. From the sealed corridors of Pyongyang, where secrets are kept behind steel and silence, we now move into a very different kind of danger. Not one hidden behind locked doors, but one that lies completely exposed, blazing under an open sky, humming with heat and chemical fury. Our next stop is a place so inhospitable that even bacteria struggle to survive. A place where the earth seems alive, bubbling, steaming, and shifting underfoot. Welcome to the Danakil Depression. Located in northeastern Ethiopia on the border with Eritrea, the Danakil Depression sits at one of the lowest points on Earth, about 100 min below sea level. But it's not just its depth that sets it apart. This region is one of the hottest, driest, and most geologically active places on the planet. Temperatures here can easily reach over 120 degrees F, 49 degrees C, and rain is rare to non-existent. Yet despite the heat and the desolation, life of a sort does exist here, just not the kind you'd expect. What makes the Danakil truly otherworldly are its acid pools. Scattered across this sunburned land are areas where the crust has cracked open, releasing steam, minerals, and acidic gases from deep within the earth. Over time, these emissions have created surreal landscapes, pools of toxic water, and bright neon hues, crusts of yellow sulfur, orange salt deposits, and geysers spewing steam into the shimmering heat. The colors are stunning, even beautiful. But don't be fooled. They are signs of danger, not life. The most famous of these sites is Dal, a hydrothermal field unlike anything else on Earth. Here, the ground is constantly changing, shaped by volcanic activity and the collision of tectonic plates. The air smells of sulfur. The pools fizz with carbon dioxide, and beneath the surface, acids boil and react, dissolving minerals and creating formations that seem almost alien. The pH of these waters can be below 0. That's not an exaggeration. It's chemistry at its most extreme. For a long time, scientists assumed nothing could live here. No plants, no animals, not even microbes. But in recent years, that belief has been challenged. Studies have found extriophiles, microorganisms that can survive in the harshest environments lurking around the edges of some pools. Not thriving, exactly, but hanging on. It's still debated whether these findings represent active life or remnants transported from more hospitable areas. But it adds an eerie question to the place. Is life possible even in a world that seems to reject it? The danger isn't just in the heat or the acidity. The ground itself is unstable. Crusts of salt and minerals look solid, but beneath them the surface may give way to boiling pools or sharp chemical deposits. Step in the wrong spot and your weight might crack through, plunging you into a liquid that can burn skin or worse. There are no marked trails, no fences, no signs, just the silent understanding among those who venture here. This is not a place for mistakes, and yet people have lived on the fringes of this landscape for centuries. The Afar people, a nomadic group with deep roots in the region, have learned to navigate the Danakil's hazards with care. For generations, they've harvested salt from the nearby flats, carving thick blocks by hand and transporting them by camel caravans. It's hard, dangerous work done under a punishing sun. But it continues, linking modern Ethiopia to trade routes that go back centuries. But no one lives deep inside the acid pools. No homes are built here. No crops are grown. Danakil's heart remains empty, desolate, colourful, and seething with chemical life. It is not forbidden by law like Room 39, but by nature itself. To spend time here is to feel watched not by people, but by the land which seems to pulse with something unspoken. Geologically, the region is fascinating. The Danakil Depression is part of the Afar Triangle, a tectonic triple junction where three plates, the African, Arabian and Somali, are slowly pulling away from each other. This rifting creates constant volcanic activity, earthquakes, and gas releases. It's a place where new Earth is being born, torn from the crust, inch by inch. In millions of years, this could be the site of a new ocean. For now, it's a boiling, toxic wound in the skin of the continent. That geological violence is what fuels the pools. Water, either from underground sources or from brief seasonal floods, seeps into the fractured crust, where it's superheated by magma below. It returns to the surface in scalding jets, carrying with it dissolved minerals and chemicals. These react with the surface salts, creating the bizarre landscapes we see, mounds that look like coral, formations that resemble alien cities, and colors that shift with the light from lime green to deep crimson. The danger of this beauty is very real. Tourists who visit are warned not to touch anything. No dipping fingers into the pools, no picking up crusted salt samples. The gases emitted, especially chlorine, sulfur dioxide, and carbon dioxide, can overwhelm quickly. In enclosed pockets, they can displace oxygen entirely, and the acids are not just corrosive, they're deadly. Still, the place draws attention. Scientists study it to better understand the limits of life on Earth and to consider what life might look like elsewhere. NASA has taken an interest in viewing the Danakil as an analogue for extreme environments on Mars or the moons of Jupiter. It's one of the few places on our planet that could help answer questions about the universe beyond. There's also something strangely quiet about the Danakil. Not just the absence of noise, but the way the landscape seems suspended, like it's waiting. The air shimmers, the colors pulse, and the land hisses and steams as if warning you to keep moving. Even those who've studied it for years speak of it with a kind of reverence. It is not a place that welcomes you, it tolerates you for a while. Most people will never see the Danakil in person, and that's probably for the best. The roads are
rough, the climate is brutal, and the risks are constant.
But even from afar, its existence is a reminder that our planet still holds places that seem untouched by civilization. Places where the rules are different, where beauty and danger share the same space. Where life, if it exists, clings to the edge of the impossible. The acid pools of the Danakil aren't famous like the Grand Canyon or Mount Everest. They aren't postcard destinations, they're not part of guidebook checklists, but they are extraordinary. They defy what we expect of Earth, and they sit quietly, pulsing with heat in one of the most remote corners of the globe. To look at a photograph of Dal is to question whether it's real. It seems too vivid, too strange, but it is real. It's there right now, bubbling, burning, shifting, and it will still be there long after we've left, unchanged, unbothered.
It doesn't need us. And maybe that's what makes it so mysterious, so compelling, because not every place in the world is meant to be explored. Some are meant simply to exist on their own terms, in their own time. And the Danakil Depression may
be one of those places. Beautiful, hostile, silent, and alive in ways we still don't fully understand. From landscapes that burn your skin and stain the sky with steam, we now drift out to sea. Just off the coast of southeastern Brazil, in the Atlantic, waters not far from São Paulo, lies in a place that looks peaceful from a distance. A green dot on the ocean. A quiet island, untouched and seemingly serene. But this isn't a place you can
visit. Not anymore. Ilha Cada Grande, more commonly known as Snake Island, is one of the most restricted places on Earth. No tourists, no casual visits, no stepping ashore. What keeps people away isn't secrecy or political tension. It's something
far older and far more primal. This island belongs to snakes, and not just any snakes. Some of the most dangerous on the planet. Snake Island is small, only about 106 acres. It rises out of the water like a quiet hill, covered in rainforest and ringed by jagged cliffs. There are no beaches, no ports, and no permanent human presence. The Brazilian Navy strictly controls access, allowing only select researchers, biologists, or military personnel to land there, and even then only with proper clearance and safety precautions. The reason is simple. The island is home to a species of pit viper found nowhere else on Earth, the golden lance-head viper, Bothrops insularis. A beautiful name for a terrifying creature. These snakes can grow over 1/2 meter long and deliver venom that is up to 5 times more potent than that of their mainland relatives. It's not just painful, it's fast-acting, capable of melting flesh and shutting down vital systems in hours if untreated. No one knows exactly how many golden lance heads live on Snake Island, but estimates have ranged from 1 to 5 snakes per square meter in some areas. That's not an exaggeration. In the undergrowth, in the trees, among the rocks, this is their territory, and they don't share it easily. The isolation of the island helped shape this unique population thousands of years ago as sea levels rose, and the island was cut off from the mainland. A group of lancehead vipers became stranded. With no natural predators and no mammals to prey on, they adapted. Birds became their primary food source, especially migratory species that stop on the island during seasonal flights. The golden lance-headed venom evolved to act quickly and efficiently, ensuring that prey couldn't fly away before dying. Over generations, the snakes became more specialized, more lethal, and entirely unique to this place. The island itself didn't get its nickname by accident. Stories about Snake Island have circulated for decades, often tinged with exaggeration, but grounded in very real danger. One of the most commonly repeated tales tells of a lighthouse keeper and his family who once lived on the island in the early 20th century. According to legend, they were attacked by snakes that slipped in through windows, climbing vines and even the roof. None survived. While this account may have been embellished over time, it's true that the island's lighthouse was decommissioned and automated in the 1920s. Since then, no one has lived there permanently. It's rare for a location to be so thoroughly avoided by humans, not for political reasons, not because of a harsh climate, but because nature simply won. The snakes took over and we let them, and in a way that's what makes Snake Island so fascinating. It's not just the danger, it's the idea that there's a place where we never really got a foothold, where we don't belong. Visually, the island is lush and deceptively calm. The canopy sways in the breeze, and the rocky outcrops gleam in the sun. But beneath the leaves, in the crevices and shadowed groves, the golden lanceheads move almost silently. Researchers who've been allowed to visit describe the experience as both thrilling and deeply unsettling. You tread carefully. You watch every branch. You never stay long. Conservationists have a complicated relationship with Snake Island. On one hand, the golden lancehead is critically endangered. Its entire population is limited to this single island, and environmental changes or illegal poaching could wipe them out. On the other hand, preserving the island means keeping it off limits. Protecting the species means keeping humans away. That balance has mostly been maintained. Access is tightly regulated. The Navy visits only occasionally. Biologists work in brief windows, conducting population surveys or collecting venom samples for medical research. And poaching. While a risk is difficult given the isolation and the snake's reputation, there's also an odd sense of mystery around the golden lancehead itself. Because it's so dangerous, so isolated, and so rarely seen, it occupies a strange space in the public imagination. It's real but distant, documented but elusive. The kind of creature that feels like it belongs in myth as much as in a scientific paper. Snake Island also serves as a quiet reminder of how ecosystems can shift dramatically when left to their own devices with no humans, no predators, and limited resources. The snakes adapted in extreme ways. The island is a case study in rapid evolution and natural isolation, a living lab of how species specialize when geography pushes them into a corner. But it's not just a scientific curiosity, there's something
Eerie about it too. The idea of stepping ashore and not knowing where the danger is hiding.
of being watched by dozens of silent, cold-blooded creatures as you move through their world. of knowing that no help is coming if something goes wrong. It's the kind of place that makes you feel small, temporary. Ilha Kada Grande isn't a secret, but it's also not well known. It doesn't show up on travel brochures. There are no glossy photo spreads, no tours. It exists almost like a whispered warning, known but untouchable. And maybe that's exactly how it should stay. Because some places, for all their beauty, are meant to be left alone. Some territories don't want us there. They don't invite our exploration. They don't need our footprints. Snake Island is one of those places, a wild, pulsing ecosystem where nature sets its own rules and has no intention of changing them. And in a world where so many wild spaces are shrinking, where every corner seems mapped and marked, it's strange to think that one of the most mysterious places on Earth is just sitting off the coast of one of the world's busiest countries. No locked gates, no security walls, just a quiet island holding its secrets in plain sight. From dense rainforests pulsing with danger, we now head south, far south, into the cold silence of the sub-Antarctic. It's a place most people have never heard of, and fewer still will ever see. A speck of volcanic rock rising out of the Southern Ocean, battered by wind and waves, hidden in fog. This is Saunders Island, and near its center, cloaked in snow and ice, something rare and quietly terrifying burns beneath the surface. Mount Michael. It's not the tallest volcano in the world or the most explosive, but it hides one of Earth's most elusive features, something found in only a handful of places on the planet. A permanent lava lake, a soothing molten pool of magma that bubbles and smolders day and night, surrounded by frost and freezing mist. Only a few exist anywhere on Earth. Mount Michael is the only one we know of in such an extreme remote environment, and it took us decades to confirm it was even there. Saunders Island is part of the South Sandwich Islands, a volcanic island, chain sitting halfway between Antarctica and the tip of South America. It's officially part of a British overseas territory, but there's no airport, no port, and no permanent population, just wind, snow, and ash. Mount Michael rises from this
uninhabited land like a sleeping god.
Its slopes are coated with glaciers. Its summit is almost always shrouded in clouds. On clear days, steam rises faintly from the crater. For years, scientists suspected there might be a lava lake within Mount Michael's crater. Occasional satellite imagery showed thermal signatures consistent with intense heat, but no one had ever seen it directly. The weather here changes by the hour, and the terrain is harsh, even by polar standards. Climbing the volcano would mean braving unstable rock, ice creases, and winds that can knock a person flat. For decades, it remained unconfirmed. That changed in 2019 when satellite data and infrared imaging finally provided enough consistent evidence to settle the question. The lava lake was real, roughly 100 to 200 meters wide, constantly molten deep inside the volcano's summit. It had been there all along, boiling away in one of the most isolated places on Earth. To find a lava lake is rare. Most volcanoes erupt, cool, and change. A lava lake is something else. It's a continuous churning reservoir of magma that doesn't explode or harden, just simmers. The best-known ones are in places like Hawaii, Ethiopia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, regions where researchers can observe them relatively safely. Mount Michael, by contrast, keeps its distance. Its lava lake has likely existed for decades, maybe longer, but it remains almost entirely unstudied. The idea that a lake of fire can exist in such a frozen place is unsettling in its own quiet way. The surface of Saunders Island is often coated in ice. Penguins nest on the lower slopes. The sea around it is thick with drift ice and storm swells, and yet, under the mountain's icy skin, there's a chamber of molten rock kept alive by heat from deep within the earth. It's like two planets collided, one of snow, the other of flame. The lava lake is invisible from the ground. It lies deep within the crater, hidden by steep walls and constant clouds. Even if someone were to reach the summit, seeing the lake would require near-perfect weather and the right vantage point, conditions that almost never align. Most of what we know comes from satellites, which catch glimpses of the lake's heat signature through breaks in the clouds. It's that inaccessibility that gives Mount Michael its eerie presence. There's no dramatic footage of its lava lake, no glowing red pools filmed from helicopters, just thermal images and hazy satellite photos, a few faint readings from far above, and the knowledge that something is burning out there is always just out of reach. What makes this lava lake so stable is still uncertain. Lava lakes are maintained by a delicate balance of heat, pressure, and gas flow. If too much gas escapes, the lava can solidify. If too little, it can erupt. Somehow, Mount Michael maintains that balance quietly, relentlessly. Its lake doesn't roar or erupt. It just persists. There's something haunting about that. It's not dramatic like an eruption. It's a constant presence, a reminder that Earth is always moving beneath our feet, even in the loneliest places. Mount Michael isn't watched by crowds. It doesn't threaten cities or alter flight paths. It burns quietly in the dark, a geological whisper in the middle of the sea. And unlike other lava lakes which have been studied and photographed and even approached, this one remains mostly untouched. No research team has climbed down into its crater. No instrument has measured its gases or mapped its shape. It exists in almost complete isolation, discovered but not truly explored. The region around Mount Michael adds to the mystery. The South Sandwich Islands are part of a volcanic arc caused by the subduction of the South American plate beneath the small South Sandwich Plate. This tectonic clash creates frequent earthquakes and volcanic activity. Most of the islands are active in some way, but Mount Michael is among the most consistent. Its eruptions are mild but ongoing. Steam rises. Ash occasionally drifts into the sky. But the lava lake remains, always beneath the clouds. Getting there is no small feat. The island has no harbors. Ships can't safely dock. Researchers must land by inflatable boat, then hike across unstable volcanic slopes in freezing conditions. Helicopters are nearly impossible due to wind, and even if you could reach the crater's rim, the vertical drop and constant fog would likely obscure the view. Yet despite all this, Mount Michael has become a subject of fascination for volcanologists and remote sensing experts. It's a rare geological feature in a rare environment, and it raises questions about Earth's inner workings, about what sustains a lava lake, and about how much we still don't know. Because Mount Michael is still largely a question mark, a glowing one. It reminds us that even with satellites and drones and global maps, there are parts of this planet that remain unmeasured, places where nature doesn't offer easy access or clear answers. In some ways, the lava lake is a perfect metaphor for Earth itself, active, hidden, and quietly powerful. We know it's there. We can measure its heat, but we haven't seen it. Not directly, not yet, and so it burns out in the coldest corner of the sea, unwatched, untouched. A flicker of fire in a place no one was meant to stay. Now we leave behind distant islands and wind-swept volcanic peaks and drift toward calmer seas. But the quiet here carries its own weight. Just beyond the soft glow of Venice's canals lies an island few speak of and fewer still approach. A place shrouded in vines and silence where history clings to every stone. This is Povia Island, nestled in the Venetian lagoon. Povia is barely
visible on most tourist maps. It's small, just a sliver of land between Venice and Lido, and yet its story stretches centuries.
Unlike the desolate remoteness of some other places we've visited, Pova is close to one of the world's most famous cities. You can see it from a boat, glimpse it from the right vantage point in Venice, but very few ever approach it. Fewer still set foot on its soil, and even among Venetians, the island is spoken of with unease. At first glance, it's nothing out of the ordinary. Overgrown trees, an old bell tower rising from the middle, and crumbling buildings softened by age. But it's the silence that gets to you. There are no birds here, no movement in the windows. The paths are swallowed by ivy. Nature has tried its best to cover the past, but it hasn't quite succeeded. Povelia's history isn't defined by a single moment. It's a slow accumulation, a sediment of suffering and silence layered over centuries. Each chapter bleeds into the next, and none of them
end gently.
In Roman times, the island was likely a place of refuge used by mainlanders to escape the waves of invading forces that swept through northern Italy. A temporary shelter, quiet and remote, surrounded by the safety of the lagoon. By the 14th century, Povaglia's role had shifted. Venice, a city deeply entangled in Mediterranean trade, was also vulnerable to the diseases that came with it. The Black Death had made its way across Europe, and the Venetians, pragmatic and fearful, needed a buffer. Povaglia became a laserto, a quarantine island. Incoming ships from foreign ports would anchor nearby. Passengers and crew, if they showed even the faintest symptoms of illness, were brought ashore and isolated for 40 days. Quaranta journey, they would wait, some recovered. Many didn't. It was an act of public health, but also one of quiet abandonment. In the 18th century, as outbreaks of plague returned, Povaglia's purpose darkened. Further, island was expanded and formalized into a full quarantine facility, complete with check-in processes, confinement buildings, and staff to manage the endless influx of the dying. By now, the island had already seen its share of trauma. But what came next left an even deeper imprint. Thousands were sent here, often with little warning. Entire families were removed from Venice and relocated to the island's narrow strip of land, left to wait out a disease for which there was no cure. Once here, many were never seen again. As the dead accumulated faster than they could be buried, the island became not just a place of quarantine, but a place of disposal. Massive plague pits were dug. Fires burned night and day. Corpses were layered with lime and ash. And when the pits filled, more were dug. Some accounts, unverifiable, but persistent, claimed that the cremated remains and decaying bodies were simply turned into the soil. By the end of the 1700s, the island itself had changed in composition. Its ground, some researchers suggest, is now made up in part of human remains. Ash
and bone beneath the surface, thousands of lives folded into the land.
And beneath the tangled vines and leaning structures, they're still there. The Venetian government eventually shuttered the plague facility, but the island wasn't left to rest. In 1922, it was transformed again, this time into a psychiatric hospital. It was the kind of place societies once built, far from view, isolated, out of reach. At a time when mental illness was poorly understood and often feared, treatments ranged from the ineffective to the inhumane. Electroshock therapy, isolation, crude surgical interventions. These weren't exceptions but norms. Povaglia became a place where people were sent quietly and left to disappear from public memory. A convenient solution for families with no answers and for a government with limited oversight. The building still stands. Its brick facade leans under the weight of decades of wind and salt air. Plaster peels from the walls like old skin. Hospital beds lie rusting under roofs that have partially collapsed. Wooden doors hang open. Broken glass crunches underfoot. Patient records, yellowed, brittle, remain scattered across the floors as if someone left in a hurry and never came back. Everything is still there, just quiet now. The stories from that era are hard to untangle. Official records are scarce, and most of what's passed down comes from whispered local accounts and the writings of urban explorers. But there are patterns, unsettling ones, tales of mistreatment, overcrowding, and experimentation, accounts of doctors conducting unauthorized procedures, using patients as test subjects for experimental therapies. One story repeated often but never confirmed speaks of a head physician driven mad by what he saw or did on the island, who eventually threw himself from the hospital's bell tower. The hospital closed in 1968. There was no effort to repurpose it, no cleanup, no memorial. The island was simply sealed again, as if too much had happened there for anything else to take root. Since then, it's remained untouched. No redevelopment, no caretakers, just the slow, steady process of decay, nature creeping back in, and silence stretching out year after year. Today, the Italian government prohibits public access to Pavlia. Officially, it's for safety reasons. The structures
are unstable, the terrain overgrown, but the island has acquired a reputation stronger than any fence.
It's not just abandoned, it's avoided. Locals don't go there, tour boats pass it without comment. And while many of the ghost stories tied to the island are exaggerated or fictionalized, the real history is haunting enough on its own. What makes Pavlia so eerie isn't just the architecture or the isolation. It's the fact that everything remains in place. The buildings haven't been demolished. The past hasn't been paved over, it's simply been left untouched. A place where time didn't move on, but stopped. Stepping onto the island, if you ever could, would be like entering a moment sealed in amber. The smell of mildew and seawater, the quiet crunch of broken glass, the sway of trees growing through doorways. Everything was frozen. The bell tower still stands. Originally part of a 12th century church, it was later incorporated into the hospital as a watchtower. It's the tallest structure on the island, and it casts a long shadow. Some say the bell once rang on its own, long after it had been removed. Others say they've seen lights in the windows or heard footsteps on the upper floors. But even without the stories, the tower has a presence. It watches over the island, over the buildings, the ash-covered ground, the forgotten beds, watching, as it always has. What's unusual about Pavlia is that its story isn't ancient. This isn't a Bronze Age ruin or a lost medieval castle. This is modern. There are photographs from the hospital era, medical records, family members of patients still living today. The island's final chapter closed only a few decades ago, but it feels older. Time in places like this seems to stretch differently. In recent years, there have been attempts to revive the island. Proposals have been floated to turn it into a luxury hotel, a park, or a museum. None have succeeded. The deals fall through. The funding collapses. Something, call it logistical or something else, always seems to get in the way, and so the island waits. It doesn't crumble quickly. It just continues, locked in place, silent and strangely intact. For those who study forgotten places, Pavlia is a rare thing, a complete island untouched for over half a century, with buildings still standing and history still visible in every room. It's not a myth, it's not a legend, it's real, which makes it all the more unsettling. There's something about places like this, close enough to see, too far to touch. Places with stories written not in stone, but in silence. And Pavlia is one of the clearest examples of how a place can carry the weight of what happened there. Without needing special effects or dramatization, it tells you everything with its stillness. We may never know the full truth of what happened on Povia. The records are incomplete. The people who lived and worked there are gone, and the island itself won't explain. But in the peeling walls, the rusting bed frames, and the whispering trees, something lingers. Not ghosts, just memory. As we leave the Venetian lagoon behind, the outline of the island fades into the mist. It becomes, once again, part of the scenery. Just another patch of green in the water. But once you know what it is, it's hard to forget. The island where no one goes, where the buildings remain, and where the air still carries the weight of what came before. Next, we trade dust for humidity into the deep Amazon, where the land is so remote, even satellites struggle to see what's there. But we're not entering the familiar parts marked on maps or visited by tour boats. We're heading west toward one of the last true frontiers on Earth, a place where roads vanish, signals fade, and the canopy closes in tight above the forest floor. This is the Javari Valley, a region so vast, so remote, and so densely forested that it remains one of the least explored places on the planet. It is not abandoned, but rather deliberately left alone. Located along the border between Brazil and Peru, the Javari Valley Indigenous Territory spans more than 85,000 kilometers, an area roughly the size of Austria. But it's not the size that makes it so mysterious. It's what, or more accurately, who lives there. The Javari Valley is home to the largest concentration of uncounted tribes in the world. Dozens of groups, possibly more, live deep in the forest here, maintaining lifeways that predate the modern world by millennia. And many of them have never had peaceful contact with the outside. They're not ghosts or myths. Satellite imagery and flyover photography have revealed traces of human presence, cleared gardens, narrow footpaths, small circular thatched roof huts grouped around communal spaces. Footage captured during low-altitude flights has shown individuals looking up, from the treetops armed with bows, often gesturing or hiding when aircraft pass overhead. These people are real, and they are choosing to remain apart. The Brazilian government has acknowledged their existence and unusually created strict protections around the territory. Entering the Javari Valley without special clearance is not just discouraged, it's illegal. Not to protect outsiders, but to protect the people inside. Many of these groups lack immunity to common diseases. A single flu outbreak, introduced unknowingly by a visitor, could devastate entire communities. And there is also the deeper ethical question. What right do we have to reach into lives that do not ask for our presence? Despite the laws, the region is not without threats. Illegal loggers, miners, and poachers sometimes breach the boundaries. Drug trafficking routes thread through the edges, and in recent years tension has increased between those seeking to exploit the forest and those tasked with defending it. In 2022, the world was shaken by the news of the murder of British journalist Dom Phillips and Brazilian indigenous expert Bruno Pereira, who were investigating illegal activities in the area. Their deaths underscored just how dangerous and contested this territory remains. But even with these incursions, much of the Javari Valley remains untouched. Vast swathes of it have never been scientifically surveyed. The terrain is unforgiving. Rivers snake unpredictably through thick foliage. Mountains rise unexpectedly from flat land. The forest hums with life. Birds, insects, frogs, jaguars, and beneath the canopy lies the unknowable. Civilizations past, and present that may never appear in textbooks or museums. There's something quietly humbling about this. In an age when satellites orbit every corner of the Earth, when artificial intelligence models human behavior, and when cities push higher and faster with each passing year, the idea that entire communities live with no internet, no electricity, no currency, even known names as we understand them, is hard for many to grasp. Yet here they are, not relics of the past, but active breathing societies with their own systems, rules, languages, and cosmologies. Linguists estimate that the Amazon as a whole may be home to over 150 undocumented languages. Many of these may exist in the Javari region, spoken by a few hundred people at most, and passed down orally across generations. There's almost no written record, no dictionaries, no translators, just memory and voice. These languages, some completely unrelated to any others we know, represent entire ways of thinking about the world. Entire systems of classification, myth, navigation, time, and kinship that exist only here under these trees. Occasionally, fragments reach us, stories from neighboring tribes, those who once had contact or were related by marriage, trade, or conflict, offer glimpses into uncontacted lives. Some tell of ancestors who fled violent encounters, retreating deeper into the forest to preserve
autonomy. Others speak of spiritual divides, groups who chose to reject outside influences, believing the forest itself commanded it.
To them, outsiders are not just unknown, they are taboo. There is also the archaeological mystery. What lies beneath the forest floor? In other parts of the Amazon, LiDAR, a form of airborne laser scanning, has revealed massive earthworks, roadways, and city-like structures hidden beneath centuries of foliage. We now know that the Amazon was not an untouched wilderness, but home to dense populations and complex societies long before European arrival. Could the Javari Valley hold similar secrets? Could its rivers once have been highways, its clearings were once marketplaces? We may never know, and that's part of what gives the Javari its weight. It is not an open book, it resists being read. It reminds us that the world is not entirely ours to explain or access. There are places where curiosity must meet respect, where the only responsible answer to mystery is silence. Today, the Javari Valley is watched over by Brazil's National Indian Foundation, FUNAI, alongside indigenous associations and NOSs that advocate for territorial protection. Surveillance is mostly aerial with remote sensors and patrols along the edges. Efforts are also made to train and employ indigenous rangers, people who understand the land not as lines on a map, but as living territory with memory, danger, and meaning. Yet, the future is fragile. Climate change, political shifts, and economic pressures all pose risks to regions like the Javari. It would take very little to upset the balance, to push further into the forest, to strip more land, to introduce more contact, and once that happens, there's no undoing it. No way to restore what was unspoiled. In the end, the Javari Valley stands not as a place to be explored, but as one to be left alone, not abandoned, but protected. It is one of the last regions on Earth where humanity's story continues in parallel, not in concert, where time moves differently and where the modern world is not unwelcome but irrelevant. Now we head north, past the tree line, past the last roads, into the hard, frozen ground of Russia, where one of the deepest holes on Earth was drilled, and where the unknown still lingers below. Out on the Kola Peninsula, beyond the Arctic Circle, winds whip across the frozen rock, and snow settles into every crease of the land. It's remote, bleak, and quiet. But here, hidden beneath a rusting metal cap and crumbling remnants of Soviet ambition, lies the deepest man-made hole on Earth, the Kola Super Deep borehole. On the surface, it doesn't look like much, just a welded metal lid bolted down over what appears to be a sealed industrial shaft. But what lies beneath stretches over 12 kilometers into the Earth's crust. That's more than 40,000 FT down, deeper than the Mariana Trench, deeper than any drill, mine, or probe has ever gone. And it was never meant to be secret. When the Soviets started drilling in 1970, it was a scientific mission, an attempt to better understand the Earth's composition by going as far down as possible. But like so many things hidden in plain sight, What they found became more unsettling than anyone expected. The project, known officially as the Kola Super Deep Scientific Drilling Project, was part of a Cold War race, not for weapons, but for knowledge. The Americans had attempted something similar years earlier with Project Mole, an effort to reach the boundary between the Earth's crust and mantle beneath the ocean floor. That mission was cancelled. The Soviets, however, pressed on. For 2 decades, they drilled relentlessly through layers of metamorphic rock, charting temperatures, measuring seismic waves, and collecting data from depths never before reached. And they kept going past granite, past ancient basalt. At around 7 kilometers down, they hit rocks over 2.7 billion years old, some of the oldest ever brought to the surface. At 9 kilometers, they found microscopic plankton fossils trapped in rock that should have been far too deep for such remnants to exist. It defied expectations. Fossils of single-celled marine organisms preserved in rock that predated all known complex life. How they got there, how they survived the heat and pressure, remains uncertain. Then came the heat. As the borehole deepened, the temperature rose much faster than predicted. By the time they reached their final depth, 12 to 362 mimas, the temperature was close to 180 meters C, 356 degf, far hotter than models had anticipated. The rock became plastic-like, shifting under the drill. Equipment began to fail. Progress slowed. Eventually, the heat and pressure made further drilling impossible. In 1992, they stopped, but the stories didn't. Over the years, rumors attached themselves to the borehole like moss to stone. Some claimed the drill had hit a cavern filled with superheated gas. Others said engineers heard sounds from deep within. Strange noises, voices, screams. The infamous well-to-hell hoax, a tabloid fabrication from the late 1980s, claimed that Soviet scientists had drilled into a chamber of fire and damnation, recording the screams of the damned before sealing the borehole forever. It was nonsense, of course, but the imagery stuck. Even today, if you search for the Kola Super Deep Borehole, you'll find just as many ghost stories as you will geology reports. And maybe that's part of the mystery's pull. The Kola borehole is real. You can find the coordinates. You can visit the site, though there's little to see now beyond rusted debris and a sealed hatch in the ground. But it represents something more than a scientific effort. It represents a boundary between what we know and what we can never quite reach, because even at over 12 kilometers down, the drill barely scratched the surface of the Earth's crust. The crust, on average, is between 30 to 50 kilometers thick on continents. Beneath that lies the mantle, a layer we've never physically touched, and beneath that the molten outer core and then the solid iron heart of the planet. The Kola project was ambitious, groundbreaking, but in the grand scale of the Earth's interior, it barely made a dent. Still, the data collected changed our understanding. They found that seismic waves didn't behave the way they thought they would. That water existed deep in the crust where none should have been. That granite could act like a sponge under intense pressure. Every layer told a new story. Every core sample pulled up carried whispers of time so ancient it bent the imagination. Eventually, funding dried up. The collapse of the Soviet Union brought economic hardship, and the project was abandoned. The facility deteriorated. The access tower was torn down in 2008. Today, the only remnant is the welded steel cap. It's been called the door to hell, though no heat escapes. No sound rises, just cold metal and quiet wind. The Kola borehole is a paradox. It's the deepest we've ever dug, but still nowhere near the center of the Earth. It was meant to answer questions, but raised just as many. And it stands today not as a monument to success, but to the limits of human reach. We can go to space, we can send probes to Mars, but dig too deep into our own planet, and it's like the world pushes back. What lies beyond that depth? Theoretical?
Models, yes. Seismic interpretations, yes. But nothing we've touched. No instruments have brought back samples from the mantle. No drill has reached the bottom of the crust. And the deeper we go, the more unpredictable things become. Heat, pressure, composition.
The ground beneath our feet is still in many ways a mystery. And there's something eerie about that. The idea that we know more about the surface of other planets than we do about the deep interior of our own. That just beneath the soil and stone lies a world uncharted, not because it's forbidden, not because it's magical, but because it resists us. The deeper we try to go, the more the Earth reminds us of its age, its force, its silence. So the Kola superdeep borehole remains sealed. Not out of fear, but because the limits of science, at least for now, have been reached. And maybe that's the most haunting part. Not the rumors of screams or strange sounds, but the silence. The simple final resistance of the Earth drawing a line at 12,262 Menace and saying, not yet. As we move on from this site, it's worth pausing to reflect on what it represents. Ambition, curiosity, persistence, but also humility. For all our technology, for all our knowledge, there are still places, deep places, that remind us we're visitors on the surface. That some mysteries lie not in the stars, but in the ground beneath our feet. As we come back from the depths of the Earth, we now head to the edge of the habitable world, to a place so remote, so harsh, that it's been called the most Mars-like environment on Earth. Not for its color or craters, but for its silence. Devon Island in the Canadian Arctic is the largest uninhabited island on the planet. No towns, no permanent residents, just endless rock, ice, and wind. If you were dropped there without warning, you might not guess you were still on Earth. Covering more than 21,000 square miles, Devon Island lies in the high Arctic archipelago above the 75th parallel. For most of the year, the island is locked in ice. Temperatures can plunge well below freezing, and summer is brief, chilly, and rarely forgiving. There are rivers and valleys, but they're often frozen. The landscape is scarred and barren, shaped by glacial erosion and ancient impacts. It feels untouched, not just by people, but by time. At the heart of Devon Island lies the Hilton crater, a 23-million-year-old impact site roughly 12 meters wide. This massive crater, created by an asteroid slamming into the surface, left behind fractured terrain and exposed layers of ancient rock. The surface is dry, windswept, and largely devoid of vegetation. Conditions that make it eerily similar to the surface of Mars, and that's why NASA comes here. Since the late 1990s, Devon Island has served as a training ground for planetary scientists, astronauts, and researchers. The Horton Mars project, one of the island's key missions, uses the harsh environment to simulate future manned missions to Mars. Rovers are tested here. Suits are worn and evaluated. Teams live in isolation to study how human crews might respond to being cut off from civilization. It's not a game or a stunt, it's serious preparation, and the island's desolation makes it ideal. But Devon Island is more than just a Martian standing. It's also one of the most compelling natural testaments to how far humans will go to understand the unknown. The island's unforgiving conditions, permafrost, high winds, rocky terrain, force every step to be deliberate. And that same difficulty is what keeps it so mysterious. Most of the island remains unexplored on foot. There are valleys and ridges no one's ever walked, caves tucked into icy cliffs, hidden creeks that may have run for thousands of years, never seen by human eyes. Very little grows here. A few mosses and liachians cling to the rock in scattered patches. There are no trees, no real shelter from the wind. Animal life is scarce. Some musk oxen, the occasional Arctic fox or hare, and birds that pass through in the short summer. But for most of the year, there's nothing but the sound of wind across stone. You could walk for miles and never see another living thing, and that in itself is what draws people in. The island is completely uninhabited year-round. No villages, no research stations that operate in winter. In fact, the only way in or out is by charter plane in the summer months, landing on a rough airstrip at the bottom crater's edge. When the crews leave, they leave everything behind. Not just their gear, but the stillness. The quiet settles back in. The snow smooths over footprints. The wind erases the memory of human presence. There's something almost haunting about that kind of place. Devon Island is real. It's mapped, named, studied, and yet it feels untouched. It invites a different kind of curiosity. Not the thrill of discovery, but the weight of it. What does it mean that there are places like this, places where nature has simply continued on without us, indifferent and unmoved? Some parts of the island have yet to be fully surveyed. The terrain is simply too vast, too rough, and too inaccessible for detailed regular mapping. Satellite imagery helps, of course, but it's not the same as being on the ground. In many ways, Devon Island is one of the last places on Earth that still holds the possibility of true terrestrial exploration. You don't have to cross a galaxy to find alien landscapes. Sometimes you just have to go north. And while the island is currently silent, it hasn't always been. Indigenous peoples, particularly the Thule and Dorset cultures, once passed through the greater Arctic region, though there's little evidence they ever settled on Devon Island. The reasons are likely practical: too cold, too barren, too isolated. Even for nomadic hunters adapted to Arctic life, Devon Island offered little. Today it's part of the Chicxulub region of Nunavut, and its name Tatlerut in Inuktitut still holds meaning in the larger cultural memory of the land because of its isolation and preserved geology. Devon Island also draws interest from paleontologists and climate scientists. The island's rock layers provide insight into Earth's distant past, while its climate patterns help model future shifts. Every expedition here isn't just about space, it's also about time, about looking back millions of years through stone, ice, and silence. But to step onto Devon Island is to feel like you're not quite on the same planet anymore, even seasoned. Researchers speak of the profound stillness, the sense of separation. It's not just the absence of people, it's the absence of signs that they were ever meant to be here. You don't just walk across Devon Island, you tread carefully, knowing that this is a place the Earth has held on to tightly. There are stories, of course. Any place this remote, this alien, breeds speculation, tales of strange lights seen from satellites, claims unproven of military monitoring or classified activity in the region. These stories rarely come with evidence, and yet they persist, because Devon Island feels like a secret. It doesn't have locked gates or signs warning you away. It just makes it incredibly hard to get there in the first place. And that's perhaps what gives it its eerie power. It isn't forbidden, it just doesn't invite you. It's a place that resists habitation, a place where humans are only visitors and only ever temporarily. So when the NASA teams leave, when the snow begins to fall again, Devon Island returns to what it was before, a massive, silent expanse, a stand-in for Mars, a glimpse of another world, and one of the last places on Earth where you can truly feel alone. If you're ever lucky or unlucky enough to stand at the center of the hot and crater with nothing but sky above and rock stretching out in every direction, you'll understand Devon Island doesn't need myths or legends. Its mystery is in the silence. Its story is written in cold wind and ancient stone. and when you leave, it won't remember you. Next, we shift from the wilds of untouched nature to something far more calculated, not hidden by jungle or sea, but by design. Just 70 miles from Washington, D.C., nestled quietly in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, lies a place that isn't abandoned, isn't ancient, and isn't decaying. It's sealed, active, and heavily protected. This is Mount Weather, one of the most secretive emergency bunkers in the United States, a facility that exists not as a relic of the past, but as a plan for the future, specifically a future in crisis. The name Mount Weather might sound scenic, even pastoral, but behind that modest title is a vast and fortified compound operated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. Its official purpose is continuity of government. If something catastrophic were to happen, nuclear war, biological attack, or a complete breakdown of the national infrastructure, Mount Weather is where the highest-ranking members of government are meant to go, and once they go in, no one else goes with them. The history of Mount Weather traces back to the Cold War, when fears of nuclear conflict shaped everything from school drills to architectural design. In the 1950s, as the threat of Soviet missiles grew more tangible, the US government began constructing underground facilities meant to outlast any attack. Mount Weather was one of the most significant of these. Built beneath 400 acres of mountain, it's a self-sustaining underground city complete with power, water, air filtration, dormitories, medical centers, and even a broadcast system that can override public television and radio. But if you go looking for information, you won't find much. Details are sparse, cloaked in layers of national security. Even the site's location is ambiguous on many maps. There are satellite images, vague press releases, and occasional references
in official documents, but almost no first-hand accounts. Those who have visited rarely speak about it, and those who are stationed there operate under high clearances. It's not abandoned, quite the opposite.
Mount Weather is maintained, monitored, and, when needed, activated. After the September 11th attacks, it was reportedly used to house congressional leadership. It's designed to survive scenarios in which the rest of the country does not. That's part of what makes it so eerie. While most hidden places are echoes of the past, Mount Weather is a plan for a very real and very unsettling future. What we do know comes from scattered breadcrumbs. A 1974 report by the Progressive magazine described a city-like underground structure, complete with roads and buildings beneath the mountain surface. Other reports suggest the presence of a full-scale operations center capable of directing FEMA responses nationwide and coordinating communications in the event of a national emergency. And while it might sound like science fiction, the Mount Weather facility is no myth. It was referenced in congressional hearings. It appears in federal emergency response plans. It's connected both metaphorically and physically to an entire network of continuity of government bunkers spread across the country. Think of places like Raven Rock in Pennsylvania or Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. Together, they form a kind of subterranean infrastructure, one that quietly hums beneath the surface of national awareness. Mount Weather is unique, though, in that it blends secrecy with proximity. It's not buried in some remote corner of the world. It's just a short drive from one of the most powerful cities on Earth. People live nearby. Roads pass close. Yet, what happens beyond the fences, behind the cameras, and beneath the mountain is sealed off deliberately and indefinitely. And unlike ancient ruins or abandoned facilities, Mount Weather doesn't invite exploration. There are no tours, no public reports, no casual references from former employees. In fact, even photographing the site from a distance is likely to draw attention. It's protected not just by barbed wire, but by silence. An institutional silence that feels heavier than any natural barrier. It's this paradox that gives Mount Weather its tension. It's not haunted by the past. It's prepared for a future we'd rather not think about. A future where the rest of us are left outside the gates, where leadership is preserved not in symbolic terms but in literal physical shelter. And while that might make sense from a governmental standpoint, it also paints a stark picture of how fragile our systems really are. In a world where access is often taken for granted, Mount Weather is a reminder that some doors stay closed, that some plans exist far above our clearance level, and that should the unthinkable happen, there are those who already know exactly where to go and what to do, while the rest of us are left to figure it out on our own. Yet, despite its secrecy, Mount Weather is not a villain. It's a safeguard, a contingency, a last resort designed not for power, but for continuity. That doesn't make it any less unsettling, but it does add complexity to its mystery. It exists in the space between protection and exclusion, between preparedness and paranoia. As with many of the places we've explored, Mount Weather raises more questions than answers. How much of what's said about it is true? How far do its tunnels stretch? Who has the keys? And what happens when they're used there? And with that, we move on. Our next stop takes us from a facility built for human survival to a place where no human lives at all. Here, surrounded by grey waves and heavy sky, lies a crumbling island of concrete and shadows. This is Hashima Island, also known
as Ganjima or Battleship Island.
a place so dense with human history and so completely abandoned that it feels caught in time, floating between memory and decay. Just 15 kilometers off the coast of Nagasaki, Hashima rises from the sea like a fortress. The nickname Battleship Island comes from its silhouette, which resembles a military vessel from afar. But it's not war that built this place, it was coal. Beneath Hashima lies an undersea coal seam, and in the late 1800s the Mitsubishi Corporation saw its potential. They built mining shafts deep below the seafloor and constructed buildings to house the workers who would extract the fuel of Japan's industrial age. And so brick by brick the island grew, not just upward, but outward, with land reclaimed from the sea to create more space for industry and habitation. At its peak in the 1950s, Hashima was home to more than 5,000 people. Schools, shops, apartment blocks, a hospital, even a rooftop garden, all built atop a tiny scrap of rock measuring just 480 meters long. It was one of the most densely populated places on Earth, more crowded than Tokyo or New York. Families lived in tight concrete quarters. Workers descended into the dark each day, and life carried on, surrounded by sea walls and the endless rhythm of waves. But while Hashima was once a symbol of progress, its story carries a darker weight. During World War II, forced labor was used on the island. Korean and Chinese workers were brought here under harsh conditions, many with no choice and no way out. They worked in dangerous mines, lived in overcrowded dormitories, and suffered from exhaustion, malnutrition, and abuse. For these individuals, Hashima was not a marvel of engineering. It was a prison of stone and smoke. After the war, the island continued to operate with mining technology improving and community life slowly evolving. Children played on the rooftops. Families gathered for meals, the hum of machinery mixed with the sound of the ocean. But the coal wouldn't last forever. As petroleum became the preferred energy source in the 1960s, demand for coal plummeted. The mines began to close. And in 1974, Mitsubishi officially shut down operations on Hashima. Everyone left. They left quickly. Tools were dropped where they were last used. Furniture remained inside apartments. Television sets, clothing, books, all abandoned without anyone to maintain it. The island began to decay. Rain poured through broken windows. Sea winds stripped paint from walls. Roofs caved in. Entire floors crumbled into dust. In less than a decade, The thriving island became
a ruin, a concrete ghost ship drifting just off Japan's coast.
What makes Hashima so haunting is how intact it still feels. Unlike ancient ruins slowly erased by time, this place is recent, modern, and almost familiar. The architecture is mid-century, the furniture is recognizably contemporary. There are photos, records, personal items, frozen in place as if time simply paused. It's a portrait of life halted mid-motion. For decades, the island remained completely closed to the public, too dangerous to explore, too remote to maintain, but curiosity never really faded. Eventually, guided tours were introduced to a small portion of the island. Visitors could walk along designated paths and view the decaying buildings from a safe distance. But most of Hashima remains off-limits, its inner corridors too unstable, too risky. What lies deeper inside the island is still hidden from view. In 2015, Hashima was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site as part of Japan's Meiji Industrial Revolution. The decision sparked controversy. While it recognized the island's significance in industrial history, it also revived debate over the wartime, forced labor practices that occurred here. Japan acknowledged that Korean and other laborers had been brought to the island under duress, but for many, the scars run deeper than a plaque can mend. Today, Hashima stands as a symbol of ambition and aftermath, a reminder of how quickly a place can rise and how quickly it can fall. It's not just the buildings that are crumbling, it's the entire idea that something built with such intensity could simply be left to the wind and waves. Yet, there's a strange beauty to Hashima. The ivy creeping through broken windows, the soft light pouring through shattered ceilings, the silence punctuated only by the distant crash of surf against the sea wall. It's a place where history echoes with every gust of wind, where voices linger in the corridors, not as ghosts, but as memory. For some, it's a dystopian vision of what happens when progress goes unchecked. For others, it's a time capsule, a perfectly preserved window into the past. And for many Japanese citizens, especially those with family ties to the island, it remains a complex legacy. Pride, pain, nostalgia, and silence, all wrapped into one. Hashima reminds us that isolation doesn't always happen in the wilderness. Sometimes it happens in the center of civilization, just out of sight, a place built to house thousands, now seen only by the sea and the occasional visitor from afar. And perhaps what makes Hashima so haunting isn't just what it was, but what it still is, a place untouched by modernization, unclaimed by redevelopment. It's not a museum, not a ruin in the traditional sense. It simply endures. Just off the coast of a vibrant city, Hashima floats like a forgotten thought. Half memory, half monument, a reminder that even the most carefully built worlds can fall silent. And sometimes the silence speaks loudest of all. From a city of concrete caught in time, we head now to a desert so vast and empty that silence feels like the only thing that's ever lived there. This next place isn't hidden behind walls or water. It's hidden in plain sight, stretching out across hundreds of kilos beneath a sky so vast it seems to flatten the land beneath it. Welcome to the Woomera Prohibited Area, a place so large and so off-limits that it's often called the largest land-based weapons testing range in the world. Yet to many outside of Australia it barely registers, which is just the way it was designed. The Woomera Prohibited Area, or WPA, is located in South Australia, and it's massive at over 120,000 kilometres, and it covers more ground than many countries. That's roughly the size of England. And unlike many of the world's restricted zones, Woomera isn't defined by fences or guard towers, it's defined by space. Endless, open, sun-bleached space. The kind of place where silence feels like a physical force, and the horizon never seems to get any closer. Established in 1947 as a joint project between the United Kingdom and Australia, Woomera was born during the earliest days of the Cold War, when long-range weapons and missile testing were rapidly becoming a top priority for Western defense programs. Its location was ideal, remote, sparsely populated, and politically stable. And from the beginning, it was built for secrecy. Weapons could be launched, tracked, and recovered with minimal risk of prying eyes or accidental discovery. The land was cleared, airspace restricted, and the desert was claimed not by settlers but by science and military ambition. For decades, Woomera was one of the most secretive places on the planet. Missile programs, satellite launches, aircraft prototypes, all were tested here. In the 1950s and 60s, the area played a key role in both British and Australian weapons development. Rocket engines were fired, ballistic trajectories mapped, entire programs came and went, leaving behind little more than concrete pads, rusting towers and forgotten hangars slowly being claimed by the red dust. And Woomera wasn't just a testing ground, it was also a town, a closed one. The Woomera village was built to house defense personnel and their families. For years, it was a fully functioning community, but you couldn't just move there. You had to be cleared, assigned, brought in. Outsiders rarely had reason to visit, and even fewer were given permission to explore beyond the town's boundaries. The desert beyond was tightly controlled. Its maps are marked in vague blocks labeled red zone, amber zone, green zone. Access depended on what was being tested and who was allowed to see it. To this day, many of the operations at Woomera remain classified. Though it's no longer under the same level of international scrutiny it once was, the area continues to be used for military and aerospace testing. The Australian Defence Force maintains control, and while parts of the land are sometimes opened, for limited civilian use, the vast majority remains strictly off-limits. In recent years, Woomera has seen renewed interest as a potential site for commercial space launches and autonomous vehicle testing, but again, details are sparse and official. Statements are often light on specifics. Satellite images show a mix of abandoned infrastructure and scattered active facilities, hangars, radomes, tracking stations. But much of what lies within Woomera is simply unknown, not just to the public, but sometimes even to government departments. Outside defense, it's not about hiding monsters or conspiracies, it's about compartmentalization. A place designed to hold secrets rarely shares them, even within its own borders. The land itself adds to the atmosphere. Australia's outback is already one of the most isolated environments on Earth, and within the war zone, that isolation deepens. Roads vanish into nothing. Old testing grounds are lost beneath layers of sand and scrub. There are crash sites of missiles, of drones, of experimental vehicles that no one speaks much about. And somewhere out there, long-range test tracks stretch for hundreds of kilometers, their end points hidden beyond a shimmering heat haze. For the traveller passing through South Australia, Woomera might just seem like another patch of desert, a name on a map. But for those who know or remember its history, it holds a kind of cold reverence. This was the edge of innovation, the proving ground of things never meant to be seen. And while the town of Woomera itself is no longer classified and even has a small museum, the bulk of the area surrounding it remains tightly controlled. Access is restricted, photography is limited, and there are still warnings posted along dirt tracks. Unauthorized entry prohibited.
Live firing range, danger. Unlike many other inaccessible places, there's no sense of ancient mystery at war. No mythologies or legends passed down through generations. Its secrets are modern, recent, real, and still unfolding. It's not what
We don't know about Woomera that's unsettling. It's what we do know, that it's still in use, still relevant, and still so big that entire programs could vanish inside it without a trace. There's also the strange juxtaposition of permanence and eraser. On one hand, there are crumbling barracks, outdated communication towers, and rusted vehicles slowly sinking into the earth. On the other, there are reports of high-tech installations, drone testing fields, and tracking systems used for classified aerospace projects. Wuma is old and new at once, a relic of the Cold War that has refused to become obsolete. And there's one more layer to the story. Woomera sits on the traditional lands of several indigenous Australian groups, including the Kokatha people. Much of the testing and development was done without consultation or consent. Sacred sites were disturbed, access was denied. In recent years, efforts have been made to recognize this history and include indigenous voices in the management of the land, but the legacy remains complicated. For many, Woomera represents not just secrecy, but displacement. Yet somehow, despite all of this, the area has remained largely invisible to the broader public. It's too big to fence, too remote to stumble upon, and too tightly managed to investigate. It's not a tourist site, not a landmark. It just exists, quiet, hot, and still very much in use. There are few places like it left. In an age where satellite imagery is everywhere, where maps are always updating, and where information is just a few clicks away, war remains a void, a real one. Not because it's unknowable, but because it was built to be forgotten. As the wind moves across the saltbush and the red dust dances in long spirals, Woomera endures, silent, sprawling, and stubbornly present. You can drive past it, fly over it, study its history, but you'll never quite get inside, not really. Let's keep going. From the sun-seared expanse of Australia's hidden frontier, we now travel farther still into a place where there are no roads, no fences, and no land at all. Only water and a strange, uncanny sense of being farther from humanity than anywhere else on Earth. A place where the nearest humans are often orbiting above in the International Space Station rather than sailing anywhere nearby. This is Point Nemo, the oceanic pole of inaccessibility. A stretch of water so far from land that it feels like Earth's forgotten center. A nowhere in the middle of nowhere. Point Nemo isn't marked by anything physical. No island, no structure, no visible landmark. Just coordinates roughly 48 degrees, 52.6 minutes south, 123.6 minutes west. It lies in the South Pacific Ocean, equidistant from the coasts of three faraway islands. Duchy Island is part of the Pitcairn Islands, Motunui near Easter Island, and Mahare Island off Antarctica. From any of these, it's over 1,400 nautical miles to Point Nemo. You could drift there for days and still see nothing but the water horizon and the long, low arc of the sky. The name comes from Jules Verne's Captain Nemo, the mysterious explorer
of the deep, and it fits. Point Nemo is a place of imagination and science, of isolation and quiet.
It was officially calculated and named in 1992 by Croatian-Canadian survey engineer Hrvoje Lukatala, who used geospatial modeling to identify the most remote point in the ocean from any land mass. And since then it has become something of a symbol for solitude, for distance, and for how much of the world is still vast and uninhabited. But Point Nemo isn't just a coordinate, it's a concept. The idea that there is a point on this planet so far from civilization that standing or floating there means being farther from any human being than perhaps anywhere else on Earth. No planes overhead, no boats on the horizon, no radio chatter, no weather buoys, no lights in the distance, just deep water, strange currents, and the cold, slow movements of marine life. The depth of the ocean at Point Nemo is around 13,000 ter. Down there in the darkness, life moves in ways we barely understand. Few expeditions have targeted this region specifically. There's not much reason to. It's far from shipping lanes, far from fisheries, and difficult to reach. But that's part of what makes it so fascinating. Unlike other remote places defined by barriers, mountains, deserts, ice, Point Nemo is inaccessible because of absence. It's not blocked, it's just far. For years, the remoteness of Point Nemo has made it an ideal location for something surprisingly modern: the controlled crash sites of decommissioned spacecraft. It's known unofficially as the spacecraft cemetery. When satellites, modules, or space stations are retired and guided down from orbit, Point Nemo is often the target. Between 1971 and 2016, over 260 spacecraft were intentionally dropped into this region, including parts of the Mir space station and pieces of the old Tiangong-1 Chinese module. It's one of the few places on Earth where you can aim a falling object from orbit and be confident it won't hit anything or anyone. It's strange to think of it this way. The most remote place on Earth is also where the remains of our spacefaring ambitions come to rest, a graveyard not of bones but of burned metal and broken engineering. Somewhere down there, scattered across the seafloor, is a silent museum of our ventures beyond the atmosphere, and it just adds to the mystery of the place. Not haunted in the traditional sense, but haunted by the reach of human ambition and the limits we quietly acknowledge. Because of its remoteness, Point Nemo is also one of the most acoustically isolated places in the ocean. That makes it ideal for underwater listening stations. And in 1997, something strange was heard near it. Known only as the bloop, this ultra-low-frequency sound was detected by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. AEA, it was loud enough to be picked up over $3,000 mints away. And for years, speculation swirled. Was it a whale, a submarine, something else? Eventually, NOAA concluded that it was likely the sound of an icequake, a natural occurrence caused by the cracking of large icebergs. But the fact that the noise was so close to Point Nemo and so unclassifiable at the time only deepened the sense of eerie possibility. Even now, if you float in that part of the sea, there's the sense that you're drifting over something deep and unknowable. And yet, despite all of this, Point Nemo doesn't feel menacing. It feels quiet, software, a kind of peaceful void where the sea and sky fold into each other and time slows. It's not a place people visit, not really. You can charter a ship there, yes, and some adventurers and scientists have, but there's nothing to see when you arrive. No flag, no buoy, no marker, just GPS coordinates and the knowledge that you're as far from land as it's possible to be. And that's perhaps what makes it feel so uncanny. Most remote places have some defining trait: a mountain, a cliff, a structure. But Point Nemo has only water and absence. It's like being in the negative space of the Earth, a pocket where even the wind seems to forget where it's going. In literature and imagination, such places are fertile ground. Stories of lost civilizations, sunken cities, and deep ocean creatures all find their way into the narrative of places like Point Nemo. While there's no evidence of anything unnatural here, the combination of isolation, ocean depth, and history of unmonitored space debris makes it easy to understand why it has inspired curiosity and unease in equal measure. For scientists, it's a reminder of how much we still don't know about the oceans. For storytellers, it's the perfect canvas. For everyone else, it's simply a place that confirms the Earth still holds quiet corners. Places not touched by tourism or development. Places where silence still reigns. And it raises interesting questions too. As our planet grows more interconnected, as satellites trace every corner, and travel becomes easier and faster, how many true frontiers are left? Point Nemo is not remote because it's protected or sacred or dangerous. It's remote because it's unnecessary. No one needs to be there. Nothing demands our presence. And that makes it rare. The water around it is rich in phytoplankton and microbial life, but low in biodiversity compared to coastal zones. Large marine creatures likely pass through but don't stay. The area lacks coral reefs, island ecosystems, or human impact. It is the ocean in its most minimal, most essential form, just water and depth. Still, like all things, it won't remain untouched forever. As ocean exploration advances and new technologies make it easier to sample deep-sea environments. Point: Nemo will likely come under greater study. Some have even proposed building underwater observatories there, taking advantage of the low acoustic interference. Others simply want to preserve it as a natural control site, a quiet baseline in a world increasingly full of noise, but for now it remains what it has always been, the middle of nowhere, a dot in the South Pacific that symbolizes just how large and strange our planet still is. And whether you're a sailor, a scientist, or just a curious observer, it's a reminder that the Earth has places that don't care if we visit or even if we know they exist. Let's leave the sea behind now. The silence of open water is replaced by another kind of quiet, deeper and closer to home. Not remote this time, but right beneath the feet of millions. Hidden under cafes and cobblestones, beneath one of the busiest cities in the world, lies a shadow version of Paris. A sprawling underground network of tunnels and stone, filled not with forgotten machines or rock, but with human bones arranged in haunting, deliberate patterns. This is the catacombs of Paris. At first glance, it might sound like something out of fiction, but the catacombs are very real and very old. They weren't originally built as tombs. In fact, they began as quarries hundreds of years ago, long before Paris took its modern shape. The soft limestone beneath the city was excavated to provide the building blocks of the capital itself. The stone helped construct churches, monuments, and grand homes. Over time, as demand grew, the network of quarries expanded. Tunnels, shafts, and chambers reached like veins beneath the city. But by the 1700s, the quarries were becoming a problem. Some had been abandoned, even forgotten. Buildings above began to sag, and in a few cases they collapsed entirely, swallowed by the unstable earth. Authorities began to map the tunnels, trying to understand and secure the subterranean maze beneath their feet. Around the same time, Paris was facing a different crisis. The cemeteries were overflowing, the city was growing rapidly, and so was its death toll. The most notorious cemetery, Lénos, had been in use for centuries and was dangerously overcrowded. Burials were shallow, sanitation was poor, and residents nearby complained of the smell, the health hazards, and even bones surfacing during storms. In 1780, the cemetery's walls collapsed under the weight of centuries of decay, spilling corpses into the surrounding streets. The solution, grim but effective, was to empty the cemeteries and move the bones underground. The abandoned limestone quarries offered the perfect space. Starting in the late 1780s and continuing for decades, carts covered in black cloth moved through the city by night, carrying bones from overflowing graveyards to their new resting place beneath the streets. This was no haphazard dumping. The bones were arranged with eerie care, skulls stacked in neat rows, femurs placed like bricks, entire walls constructed from the dead. Some sections even include plaques, inscriptions, or symbolic decorations. It wasn't just storage, it was a kind of underground architecture, a design made of human remains. Today, it's estimated that more than 6 million people lie in the catacombs. Walking through the public portion of the catacombs is like entering another world. The air is cool and damp, the ceiling low. Footsteps echo strangely in the narrow passages. At the entrance to the Ouari, a term for a repository of bones, visitors pass beneath a carved inscription. Aretic lumpier de la. Stop. This is the empire of the dead. The dead here are anonymous, bones moved without names, stripped of their individual identities. but collectively they form a quiet population beneath the living city. There's no sense of menace, only a deep, lingering stillness, a reminder of how many lives came before and how closely the past rests beneath our feet. Only a small portion of the catacombs is open to the public, just over a mile of tunnels, but the full network is far larger, stretching for more than 200 meters beneath Paris, much of it undocumented or closed by law. Some areas are dangerously unstable. Others are sealed to prevent vandalism. Still, that hasn't stopped explorers called cataphiles from venturing into the forbidden sections. These urban explorers enter through hidden entrances, sewer grates, forgotten staircases, or maintenance shafts. They carry maps, lights, and a deep respect for the space. Some paint murals, others hold secret concerts or gatherings. A few simply wander. It's an entire underground culture, mostly hidden from view. Some sections have names. The beach, the chapel, the crypt of the lovers. In the deeper tunnels, strange artifacts sometimes appear. Chairs, sculptures, even libraries. In 2004, police discovered a fully equipped movie theatre deep in the restricted catacombs, complete with a screen, projector, and seating for dozens. Next to it was a fully stocked bar and restaurant area. A few days later, when they returned to investigate further, everything had been cleared out. A note was left behind: "Do not try to find us." Despite the romantic edge, the catacombs are not without danger. The tunnels are dark and disorienting. Getting lost is a real risk, especially in the restricted sections. In 2017, 2 teenagers were rescued after spending 3 days lost underground. They were found severely dehydrated but alive. Others haven't been so lucky. What's most unusual about the Paris catacombs isn't their existence, but how public they are. Unlike secret bunkers or distant islands, this is a place millions have heard of. Yet, it still manages to keep its mystery. Even after 2 centuries of tourism and myth-making, it still feels slightly unreal. A labyrinth made of history. A museum without plaques. A graveyard with no names. The danger isn't in physical access, it's psychological, existential. These tunnels confront us with mortality. Thousands upon thousands of silent reminders that life above is temporary. It's not done to frighten, but to humble. Not every forbidden place is sealed by fences or guarded by law. Some are simply unreachable. Not because they're hidden behind governments or buried beneath stone, but because the earth itself says no. Our next stop takes us high above sea level into the sharp, thin air of northern Pakistan. Here in the Karakoram Range, a jagged ice-bound
stretch of mountains where some of the tallest peaks on Earth rise into the clouds, lies a summit that no one has ever stood on. Not because no one has tried, but because no one has succeeded.
This is Machu Picchu, and it's one of the last unclimbed giants on Earth. Rising to an elevation of around 7,053 meters or nearly 4,500 ft, Machu Picchu isn't the tallest mountain in the world, or even in the Karakoram, but it holds a rare distinction. It's the highest known peak that's still technically unclimbed and still legally climbable. That last part matters. Many unclimbed peaks remain untouched because local governments, religious restrictions, or indigenous beliefs forbid access. Much, by contrast, is open to climbers. It just refuses to let anyone reach the top. Set deep in the Batra Mustak Subranj, Machu Picchu is nestled among a series of towering ridges and glacial valleys. The terrain around it is some of the most extreme in the world, remote, weather-beaten, and perilously unstable. There are no nearby roads, no cozy base camps, no bustling mountaineering villages like those found around Everest or K2. Just rock, ice, and silence. It was only in the past few decades that Mucish began to attract serious attention. Though it had appeared on maps for years, its true height wasn't accurately measured until relatively recently. At first, it was thought to be lower, possibly ineligible for the distinction it now holds, but satellite data and updated surveys confirmed its stature, and with it, its place as the highest unclimbed peak on Earth that climbers are still allowed to attempt. But permission doesn't equal access. The first real attempt on Mucish came in 2003 by a Spanish team who hoped to make a first ascent via its steep southwest face. They encountered the same thing every expedition since has faced: sheer rock walls, crumbling ice, and brutally unpredictable weather. They turned back. Others followed in the years after, each trying different lines, different approaches, different tactics. All were forced to abandon their claims. Some by injuries, others by the terrain itself. The peak remained untouched. What makes much so difficult isn't just its height. It's the way it rises. The mountain is layered in technical climbing challenges. Seracs, crevasses, cornices, and near-vertical faces that offer little in the way of safe rest. Unlike Everest or Denali, which have well-established routes and decades of climbing infrastructure, much is wild. No ropes have been left behind. No route is proven. Each expedition starts from zero. There are no local Sherpas to guide the way. No rescue helicopters circling above. If something goes wrong on Mucish, there's no quick way out. And with weather systems in the Karakoram capable of shifting within minutes, climbers often find themselves caught in storms that blanket the mountain in snow and wind so quickly even a solid camp can be buried before morning. And yet, climbers continue to try. In 2020, a small team from the UK made headlines by coming analyzingly close to the summit. They climbed higher than anyone before them, establishing camps at over $6,000 min and making a bold push toward the top. But with worsening weather and signs of dangerous instability in the snowpack, they made the difficult decision to turn around. As with every attempt before, the summit remained untouched. The mystery of Mucish isn't mystical, it's geographical. But there's something about that makes it even more compelling. In an age when nearly every corner of the world has been climbed, mapped, or documented, here is a mountain that resists not because of legend, but because of nature. Its inaccessibility is earned, not invented. There's also a kind of quiet humility in how it sits on the map. Unlike Everest or K2, whose names are known worldwide, much is obscure even to many seasoned climbers. It doesn't advertise itself. It doesn't appear in many travel guides. You won't find souvenirs bearing its name. And yet for those who know where to look, it represents something rare, a final frontier, a place that hasn't been claimed or conquered. The area around the mountain is equally sparse and striking. The Batra Valley leading toward its base is one of the most remote regions in Pakistan. It's home to small communities that live traditional lives, farming and herding in one of the
harshest climates on Earth. The locals know the mountains by older names passed down through generations. They watch the climbers come and go, and they watch the mountain remain exactly as it has always been, quiet, cold, and unmoved. And so,
much stands as it has for thousands of years, not famous, not forbidden, just unreachable. In many ways, it offers a reminder of something that's easy to forget in our mapped and measured world, that some places still say no, that not every line has been drawn, not every summit reached, and that maybe in those untouched places there's something worth preserving, not as a challenge, but as a kind of mystery, a silent presence at the edge of what we know.
As with all the places we explore, the story isn't about myth or exaggeration, it's about reality. The sheer, immovable presence of a mountain that has so far refused to let anyone stand on its peak. It may one day be climbed, but for now, much
remains what it has always been, untouched, isolated, and watching. From the frozen silence of the Karakoram peaks, we now head to a very different kind of descent. One not into thin air, but into dark water. Beneath the sun-drenched jungles and limestone plains of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula lies a vast and hidden world. Not man-made, not mythological, but natural, ancient, and in many ways still unexplored. The cenotes of the Yucatan are portals into the earth itself, leading to some of the deepest and most mysterious underwater caves on the planet. On the surface, a cenote might look like a tranquil pool surrounded by vines and stone. But beneath that still surface is a submerged labyrinth,
stretching for miles.
These sinkholes are formed when porous limestone collapses into the groundwater beneath it, leaving behind shafts, caverns, and tunnels that can plunge hundreds of feet below ground. There are thousands of cenotes across the Yucatan. Each one has its own shape, depth, and story. But some of them go far deeper than others, opening into enormous underwater chambers that have barely been touched by human hands. The deepest cenotes in the Yucatan, like Zacatón and El Zacatan's sister systems, challenge not only divers, but technology itself. These are places where light disappears quickly, where visibility drops to black within meters, and where the pressure of the water grows with each descent. Some are so deep that robotic submersibles have had to take over where humans could go no further. Zacatón, for example, is estimated to reach over 100 FT deep, far beyond the limits of traditional scuba diving. In fact, it's one of the few underwater caves where NASA has tested autonomous vehicles designed for space exploration, preparing for missions to ice-covered moons like Europa. But the mystery of these cenotes isn't just geological. For the Maya, cenotes were sacred. They weren't just sources of water in a dry land, they were entrances to the underworld. The Maya believed that these pools connected the world of the living with Shambhala, the spiritual realm beneath. Offerings were thrown into them: ceramics, jewelry, incense. In some cases, human remains have been found deep within the caves, suggesting rituals and ceremonies whose meanings we can only guess at. The line between natural formation and sacred space was blurred in Maya culture. And even today, many local communities still approach the cenotes with reverence. Some cenotes open into wide, cathedral-like chambers with beams of light slicing through the water and catching on stalactites that hang like teeth from the ceiling. Others are tight, claustrophobic tunnels that twist and fold in on themselves, filled with silt and shadows. In the deepest ones, there is no sunlight at all, only cold, pressure, and silence. Divers have reported hallucinations, a feeling of being watched, the sense that something ancient is listening in the darkness. These are not tourist destinations. The deepest cenotes are rarely visited, and for good reason. The Yucatan's underwater cave systems are incredibly fragile and incredibly dangerous. One wrong turn in a tunnel can lead to disorientation. Visibility can vanish with a single misplaced fin stroke, and the deeper you go, the more critical your margin for error becomes. This is cave diving at its most extreme, where even the most experienced explorers tread carefully and often leave markers behind to find their way back. And yet, the exploration continues because every few years a new passage is found. A deeper chamber is measured, bones are recovered, pottery is dated, and the map of this hidden underworld slowly expands. Divers like those from the Great Maya Aquifer Project have been charting these systems, linking cenotes across vast distances, revealing an interconnected web of underground rivers and sinkholes that spans nearly the entire region. The scale of it is almost beyond belief. a vast submerged landscape beneath the jungle that has shaped the culture, ecology, and mythology of the Yucatan for thousands of years. Some of these tunnels are so old they were dry during the Ice Age. In those dry periods, animals and even early humans used them as shelters. Fossils of extinct species, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, have been found in chambers that are now completely underwater. Human remains have been discovered too. Skulls and bones dating back over 10,000 years preserved by the still mineral-rich water. These aren't just caves, they're time capsules, a record of a world that existed before the surface looked anything like it does now. In recent years, LAR and underwater mapping technologies have started to reveal the full extent of these systems, but much of it remains unknown. Some of the deepest cenotes are simply too dangerous to explore thoroughly. Others are too remote, hidden in dense forest or on private land. And some, it seems, are still waiting to be discovered. Locals will tell stories of pools that appear after heavy rains only to disappear again. Of sinkholes in the jungle where the water is so black it doesn't reflect the sky. Of caves that breathe, exhaling cool air on hot days. What draws people to these places isn't just the mystery, it's the silence, the depth, the feeling of being in a place so untouched, so removed from the surface world that time seems to slow down. Beneath the jungle and limestone, in the deep blue stillness of the Yucatan cenotes, it's easy to forget the world above exists at all. These places are as dangerous as they are beautiful. But they're also fragile. The more they're explored, the more we learn not just about the Maya or the Ice Age or geology, but about how easily wonder can be lost. Some cenotes have already suffered from pollution or overuse. Others have collapsed due to nearby construction. Preservation is now part of the story too. An effort to protect these natural wonders before they're changed forever. But for now they remain quiet, deep, and just barely within reach. The Yucatan's deepest cenotes are not just holes in the ground. They're the threshold between light and dark, known and unknown, and they remind us that sometimes the most profound discoveries are not up in the stars, but down below our feet, waiting in the dark water. Finally, we now head north, far north, into the chill of the Arctic Circle, where the land is locked in ice for most of the year, and the wind carves across white mountains with nothing to stop it. Here, nestled into the permafrost of a remote island off the coast of Norway, sits a facility that isn't ancient, but feels like it belongs to another world entirely, a vault buried in a frozen hillside holding within it the quiet promise of rebirth. This is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, one of the most secure, remote, and symbolically powerful places on Earth. Svalbard itself is an archipelago in the Arctic Ocean, roughly midway between the northern coast of Norway and the North Pole. It's a place of stark beauty, sharp mountains, icy fjords, and polar bears that outnumber people. The largest settlement is Longyearbyen, a small town where daylight can disappear for months in winter, and where the ground is so permanently frozen that burials have been banned because nothing stays buried in the permafrost. It's here, carved into a mountain known as Plateau Burget, that the Global Seed Vault was built. From the outside, it looks like something from a minimalist science fiction film. A long concrete tunnel juts out from the snowy slope, ending in a geometric steel and glass facade that glows with cold blue light in the polar night. There's no grand entrance, no visible staff, no daily traffic. The vault is designed to be unassuming, silent, and secure. But behind that door lies something quietly extraordinary. Over 1 million seed samples representing the genetic diversity of crops from every corner of the world. The concept is simple but profound. The Svalbard Seed Vault is a global backup drive for the planet's agriculture, A safety net in case disaster, natural or human-made, wipes out local seed banks or threatens vital crop species. Countries from all over the world have sent samples of their most important seeds here, sealed in foil packets and locked in boxes. Each want a tiny safeguard for future food security. Wheat, rice, maize, lentils, barley, every staple you can think of, and thousands more you've never heard of, rest in the cold darkness of this Arctic vault. The location was chosen carefully. Svalbard is geologically stable and remote, far from war zones, fault lines, and major population centers. The mountain's permafrost provides natural refrigeration, ensuring the seeds remain frozen even if the mechanical cooling systems fail. The vault is built well above sea level, designed to remain dry even in the face of climate change-induced sea rise. It's intended to last for centuries, possibly millennia if needed, and yet, for all its practical intent, there's something quietly eerie about the seed vault. It is in many ways a time capsule for a future we hope never comes. A bunker not for people, but for potential, for continuity. It's the kind of place that suggests, without ever saying so, that someone somewhere is thinking about how the world might fall apart and how we might come back from it. The vault opened in 2008 after years of planning and construction. Since then, it has received shipments from nearly every continent. There are seeds from Syrian farms that no longer exist, saved just in time before war turned fields into dust. Seeds from Gina Bankanks that have burned, flooded, or gone bankrupt. It's a strange paradox. The world's most hopeful facility exists because of fear, a fear of collapse, of extinction, of forgetting. The building itself is mostly empty. There's no staff permanently stationed there. Most of the time it's sealed and cold and quiet. Entry is restricted, and even for those with clearance, visits are rare. Seeds are deposited and, in theory, only withdrawn if a catastrophic loss occurs elsewhere. In 2015, that happened for the first time. Syria's civil war forced researchers to retrieve seeds from the vault that had originally been stored by a center in Aleppo. The vault was used exactly as intended, a lifeline thrown backward in time to pull something forward into the future. Inside, the structure consists of a long access tunnel that leads deep into the mountain. From that tunnel, 3 separate storage chambers branch off. Only one is currently in use. The air is cold, dry, and still. Metal shelving lines the walls, and on those shelves sit thousands of white boxes, each one filled with sealed seed packets, labeled, catalogued, and preserved. There's no sound but the faint hum of refrigeration units. No movement but the occasional shifting of frost along the steel. It's not just the depth and chill that make the vault mysterious. It's the feeling
of potential. Each seed in that vault represents thousands of years of agricultural history.
The domestication of wild grasses, the careful selection of traits, the migration of crops across continents, the fusion of ancient knowledge with modern science. And these are not just seeds, they are stories, and they are hopes. If a disease wipes out a modern wheat strain, a long-forgotten variety from Ethiopia might bring resistance. If climate change alters rainfall patterns, a millet from ancient India might be the key to adaptation. The vault holds not just food, but solutions, possible answers to problems we haven't yet encountered. It's also a kind of museum, but not one you can tour. There are no exhibits, no plaques, no gift shop, just a locked door in a frozen mountain. And inside, the memory of what we've grown, what we've tasted, and what we might need to grow again someday. The presence of the seed.
Vault raises subtle, unsettling questions. Why did we need to build this? What does it say about the world we live in?
That a global safety deposit box for food has become not just useful, but necessary. Its existence is both comforting and haunting, a testament to our ingenuity and a quiet acknowledgement of our vulnerability. And still, it sits in the dark. The polar night lasts for months. Snow buries the entrance, aurora light flickers above, and deep inside, in silver foil and paper records, a whisper of the past waits to feed the future. In our age of digital everything, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault is stubbornly physical. You can't download a seed, you have to grow it, nurture it, keep it alive. And if it disappears, you can't just click restore from backup. That's what makes this vault so important and so strange. It's a place we hope is never used, and yet we rely on it all the same. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault isn't hidden in the way ancient tombs or remote islands are, but it is sealed off in a different sense, guarded not by stone or legend, but by cold, distance, and intent. It's one of the few modern constructions that feels timeless, not because of age, but because of purpose. And as the wind howls across the ice and the stars glint like frost above the Arctic horizon, the vault waits, quiet, cold, and full of life. The world is full of places we were never meant to see, places that challenge our idea of what's familiar, what's safe, and what lies just beyond reach. Some are sealed off by governments, others by nature itself. But all of them remind us how vast and strange this planet really is. For every city, skyline, and crowded highway, there are still deserts where no one walks, islands no one dares to land on, and corridors built to be entered only when everything else has failed. Tonight, we've traveled through some of those places, from windswept cliffs to acid pools, from Arctic vaults to hidden bunkers, and while we may never set foot in these forbidden corners of the earth, it's enough sometimes just to know they exist, to feel the weight of their silence and the mysteries they hold. If you enjoyed this journey through the inaccessible, the abandoned, and the unknown, we'd love it if you subscribed, left a comment, or explored more of our videos. There's always more to uncover, and we're just getting started. Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, stay safe.